congratulations on the show, you guys. Can you tell us what we can expect? The show starts up next week.
That's intimidating. We can expect that, an intimidating Bet Sykes.
I have a moustache in it. That's a reason to watch it.
A young Thomas Wayne.
Listen, obviously they're actors, so you have to forgive them for the fact they're better at playing somebody else than themselves. But this show is about Alfred Pennyworth, played by Jack Bannon. And no, I was saying Back Jannon because that's his Instagram handle. This is Thomas going to be Ben Aldridge as Thomas Wayne, Batman's dad, and then we have other people playing important characters like Martha Kane pops up, and I'm an invented villain, and it's kind of about the world that existed to create the butler that became a teacher and sidekick of Batman. But it's set in London in the 1960s, and these people all kind of live a life before Batman was born. So like there's this thing basically my mum always said to me when I was growing up, and it was like, you never know your parents. And I think that's got a mystery to it. She does say it like that. She says it with mystery like that, and you go, oh, my mum maybe had an interesting life before I was born. And I feel like that's what this show's about. It's about a person who ended up being in the limelight in a massive way, but they never really knew their parents, and they didn't know the life that existed before they existed. There
we go. Very good.
And in the same vein, the people that read the comic books don't know the parents either.
Yeah.
So if you watch the show, it chronicles like the history of Martha and Thomas meeting Alfred, and Bruno's written in basically Martha and Thomas are the DNA that goes in to make up who we know as Batman. So it's kind of like interesting to see their personalities unfold and to recognise traits that they have that we can then recognise later in The Dark Knight.
Ooh.
Any nod, like what kind of nods, or are we going to foreshadowing, or are we going to see Batman in the future?
Easter eggs.
Easter eggs, as you call them.
Yeah, this has been spoken about a lot. There are a few in there to look out for. Yeah.
is also quite a lot of references to villains in British culture. So there's some references to the Ripper family, Jack the Ripper. Also, there's a little nod to a quite recent one, Jimmy Savile, who is referred to as James Savile but gets hung in our show, and it's all a little bit like Did
you only get that?
there's so much kind of nodding to the history of British violence. My character is loosely based on Myra Hindley, who was a famous child killer from the north, but my character doesn't kill children, but there's a wealth of information out there because she was kind of relatively recent, of people talking about what she was like to be around, and I was able to like listen to all that and sort of channel it into the character, because the thing that we experience, kind of the older fashioned DC comic stuff, is the kind of sort of a bit cliche, like this is a good person, this is a bad person, and with this what we explore all the time is that kind of fluidity between what makes a hero, what makes a villain, and also how unsuspecting villains are in everyday life. Like when I watched all these documentaries, what struck me the most was so many people saying, well, you wouldn't have known, she seems so nice. And I think that the show plays a lot with that.
I had a bit, yeah. Well, my preparation really started with Bruno's script, because he'd already given some information as to the backstory of Alfred, and joining that daunting list of other actors who've played Alfred was something I tried not to think about. It was the script, and the great thing about doing this and it being the first season is that we're creating a whole world. It's London in 1960s, but it's not real. It's DC London. It's 13 degrees darker and weirder and more macabre and strange. but part of that as well is the physicality of these people, how they dress, the music of the time, even, you know, the smell, everything we were kind of discussing. So I felt from the beginning like, you know, it's the perfect place to set something like this, because the 60s were cool enough anyway, and this version of them, I think, is even cooler.
I feel like we only know your two characters, and you know, as they're not much about yours really at all. So tell us about them as young men and how they meet.
Well, yeah, like you said, we know where they end up, and we know that from the comics, and I guess a little bit from the films, we know that Thomas ends up as a very moral, very principled, very philanthropic man, very upstanding citizen. So I guess it's like this is the beginning of him getting there. But I think Bruno, our showrunner and creator, hasn't written just a kind of good man. He's flawed. Like all the characters in it are really flawed, and it's very much like a psychological character-based piece. But Thomas is kind of challenged by in Pennyworth. He's kind of challenged by the situations he finds himself in, like quite morally compromising situations where he's got this set of principles, but he's having to act against them all the time. Like he's not a man of violence, but he gets drawn into violence. He's, I think, ultimately out there to do good and believes in the greater good, but gets himself involved in situations and societies where he has to kind of act against his better judgment and better instinct. So I think like just the journey from A to B with all of these characters is what's exciting, because we know where they are meant to end up, but we have no idea of where they began. I think that's what the show does ultimately, is fill in those blanks and flesh out that backstory. And that's been a fun thing to be part of as well, and to be reading the scripts. We get this episode to episode, so kind of like I've been learning about Thomas as I've been playing him. Like where if you work on a film, you don't do that. You get all the information right there and then. But it's been exciting to kind of discover who he is rather than know straight off the bat. Yeah.
Yeah, and the relationship. You know, I think everyone's sort of thinking that it's a blossoming friendship between these two guys, yes. But actually, it's a chance meeting at first. Thomas comes to Alfred's place of work by chance to get his sister from there, to pick her up, and it's a chance meeting. So that's quite exciting in itself, that the whole thing, Batman, everything, might never have happened with Alfred there, because they might never have met. Yeah. And it's more, I see the relationship a little bit like two tigers circling each other. There's like mutual intrigue, but they're kind of scoping each other out. Alfred doesn't really like him very much to begin with, but they have a sort of mutual intrigue and a mutual respect for each other. But that's not to say that they're the greatest of friends, and they keep getting pulled apart and then pulled back together, because each has something that the other needs. So Thomas has money and status, which Alfred needs to get his business off the ground and not just be a lowly doorman, you know, and move on in the world. And Thomas is a wimp, so Alfred needs Thomas needs Alfred's skills, really. So
don't know about wimp. But yeah, it's certainly not. It's not buddy from the off. It's not like, it's not Starsky and Hutch. Yeah. They're very wary of each other, and they're kind of constantly scoping each other out and trying to find out what the other person's about.
And I've got to wrap up, but I wanted to also ask, how do your characters then cross paths with this villain this year? How does this kind of work out?
So Bet Sykes is an invented character, and that means that I had the luxury of kind of inventing her with the script that Bruno, so I didn't have the pressure these guys had or any expectation. And she works for a far-right organisation, which is kind of very much based and deep-rooted in British in the very thing that Britain still needs to get rid of but hasn't, which is the class divide. There's this kind of idea in Britain that we don't really ever get allowed what you have here, which is the American dream. Anybody can be anything. We're kind of all allotted our destiny pre-birth, depending on what class we're born into. And I think that the world that kind of creates is very separatist. So even though my character Bet Sykes may be capable or powerful enough to work for a higher up point, she works for beneath, and it explores ideas of resentment and frustration and maybe like dissatisfaction, underappreciation and stuff. And I think there's parallels there between her and Alfred Pennyworth's character, because he's constantly rejecting the idea that he'll be a butler, aka a servant for somebody else, because his dad's of that class and he's trying to further himself, but life keeps knocking him back down. And it's the same with the idea that he went to the army, because in Britain, you know, the people in the kind of low-end status in the army are usually working class people, and the people with more authority are upper class or middle class people. So it plays with those themes a lot. So I guess I provide a sort of tool to kind of analyse all of that conflict, and also my own personal agenda is to sort of present a female villain for 2019 that has more to fear than your desire for her as a man. There's much more complexity to her. She's got a brain, she's got an agenda, she's manipulative, she has needs and desires, just like all human beings do. But I feel that women previously have had undermined maybe in the writing of this world.
Want more extra? Hit the subscribe button and the bell and never miss a video.